I just want to preface that for this video there is a lot of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, which is more than likely since it just came out today, I would advise you to go and see it. So I just got back from the cinema watching Alien Romulus with my brother, and I gotta say, this film is fucking something else. I would also like to warn that this video will be filled with an extreme amount of glazing, so if you don't like that and you want something more negative, I'm sure that there's other review channels that will talk about this in a more negative light. However, for me, personally, I would like to say that this film is my film of the year for 2024. We had a really good set of films with Longlegs coming straight into Alien Romulus, but you know what? I'd take this over it any day. For the short opinion, I would say that this film is worth it, and I would give it a 9 out of 10. However, for people who want to hear a more detailed opinion of this, the rest of the video is for you. And also, I would like to mention that this video is completely unscripted, so I am just raw dogging the shit out of this. So if you want a more comprehensive thing, this is probably not the best place to come to, because I'm just going as I'm going. But without further ado, let's get into it. Directed by Fede Alvarez, Alien Romulus is the first bit of Alien content that we've had from the mainline film series in over 7 years. Before we would continue, I would like to point out that I am probably the biggest die-hard fan of the Alien series that there is. Like, I watch everything, do everything, and I play all the games. I am in love with the series. Now, it's been no surprise that the Alien series is in a bit of an awkward state as of recently, with the last thing that we actually had, like I said before, being almost 10 years ago. So it didn't end very well with Covenant for a lot of people. I thought it was an okay film, but like, I don't think it was as good as it could have been. However, Fede Alvarez really hoped to take this film back to Alien's horror roots as it originally was with the first film, and I'll say right off the cuff, he really did succeed. I am not a person who's spooked by horror. I watch Longlegs, the supposed scariest film of all time, and there's just nothing there for me. However, there has been moments during this film that actually got the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up, and I'm man enough to admit that. This film is great if you want like horror. However, instead of continuing from where Covenant left off, Romulus instead decides to become a prequel to everything before Aliens, which I honestly think was probably the best choice to make. Putting aside my love for the later stuff that comes in the series, I will not deny the fact that it genuinely just wasn't there. The later films, there was just not enough stuff there. There was stuff that was really flawed, stuff that didn't really work, stuff that didn't make sense. Prometheus. However, instead, Alien Romulus chooses to solidify itself as the rightful place for Alien 2. In my opinion, this is probably the best of the films, which could probably just be rose-tinted goggles, saying as its competition is Alien and Aliens, which is two of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever, with Alien being a more slasher thriller thing in space, to a more militaristically focused action film with Aliens, where you follow a ragtag group of army soldiers who you later turn to get along with and learn to love. Alvarez really stated that he wanted to bring the series back to its horror roots, and it definitely shows in this film with a lot of stuff that's more drawn out, a lot of stuff that wants to make you afraid, which is really good, and I really think that this is where the series rightfully belongs to me, personally. I've always felt that Alien is a series that massively benefits from the horror genre, and when I say horror genre, I mean like nothing but pure horror. No other action genres or anything else with that, just straight up horror. I feel like Alien works beautifully with that type of thing, because the later films went from a slasher film in space to an action horror to a really, really dark third film to a please don't get mad at us for the last film, and then everything afterwards, which was Prometheus, which was an origin story, and then Covenant, which was the sequel to said origin story, which ended on a really interesting note where you wanted to know what happened afterwards, but then they never fucking delivered. But in all seriousness, I do really feel like that this is probably the best place to take the series. With how cluttered the later on films got, I think it's only best to go right back to the roots. I mean, look at Dead Rising, for example, releasing a shitty fourth game and then realizing they fucked up and almost killed the franchise. So instead they just remake the first game. However, this film doesn't really feel like it's trying to save face with the community. No, this feels like a genuinely like real heartfelt passion project from everyone involved with it. So I feel like there's no better place to start off than to talk about the plot. It starts out on a ship that we think is our main cast ship. However, it turns out that this is a Weyland-Yutani ship, and if anyone is familiar with the series, they know that Weyland-Yutani is a bunch of little bitches. As the ship flies through some debris, we find out that this is actually the debris of the Nostromo, which is the original ship from the first film, pick up an asteroid, and then leave the ship, only to crack it open to reveal to the audience that this was actually housing the original xenomorph. In case you've forgotten, Ripley blasted that xenomorph out into the airlock of the first film during its climax. I think that's just neat in like every way. Which in timeline starts off the cycle of Weyland-Yutani getting their hands on a xenomorph and then realizing that the xenomorph is really uncontrollable and then having the entire ship wipe out. Next, we're taken to a mining planet afterwards, which is where we are introduced to our main character, Rain Carradine, played by Kelly Spaney, who is joined by Andy, which is played by David Johnson, who I originally thought was someone with some mental problems, but it just turns out he's a faulty Weyland-Yutani android who has filled her work contract, expecting it to be released so that she can make her way to Vega, a distant planet away from all the mining, diseases, and death. However, the clerk refuses, taking her 12,000-hour contract and instead making it 24,000 hours while telling her to report back to the mines, the least dangerous job on the streets of Birmingham.
Because I live in a shithole!
She's then called by her ex-boyfriend Tyler, played by Archie Rennox, whose sister we also are introduced later on in the story, played by Isabella Marquide, where we're also introduced to Bourne and Navarro, played by Spike Fern and Eileen Wu, respectively. Tyler explains to Rain that they might have actually found a way to escape the planet that they're on by going to a nearby ship that they found orbiting outside of Jackson Star. The ship appears to be derelict, however, inside the ship contains several hypersleep chambers, which Tyler plans to use on his ship so that they can go into hypersleep while escaping Jackson Star and going back to Vega. So we got ourselves a space heist. We're already given the reason to why they're going on this ship in the first place, and we're also given some tension between Bjorn and Andy, which is later revealed as there was a mining problem, and as a mine was collapsing, an android decided to let Bjorn's mother die to save a few other miners. A proper bloke, if you ask me. Which causes Bjorn to be really hostile towards Andy throughout the film. Promised to make it a clean in and out 30-minute trip, but as we all know, this is an alien film, so that's not the case. The whole reason that they wanted to bring Andy with them is because he's a Weyland-Yutani robot, and as a result, he's given the proper clearance to open up the ship so that they can actually go inside to find out what they're after. Before we continue as well, I would like to say that the atmosphere and like just the world building so far throughout this is absolutely phenomenal. It just totally feels like the time period. It really sells the Blade Runner style aesthetic of what Ridley Scott decided to go for the original films. It really sells the idea that this future is just like another trucking job for a lot of people, like how space travel was so far into the future in the Alien universe that it was just another 9 to 5 for the people that were there. And you really get to feel that throughout this new one as well. The music does a really good job at selling this, where in the start, when they're showing off the xenomorph inside of the rock, it has a very orchestral and like unholy sound to it, going from that to the more industrial and like Blade Runner-esque soundtrack from the mining complex on Jackson Star. All of it is perfect. The sound effects of the computers is just exactly what you expect from an alien film. It's just great. It's just so good. I couldn't get enough of it. They go into the ship where they find that the gravity is turned off due to anti-gravity pulses to stop the ship from blowing up and stuff, is what they say in the film. I don't quite remember, which is funny because I have the memory of a goldfish, though I just saw the film today. They find the hypersleep chambers, dock them onto the ship, only to realize that they don't have enough fuel for the whole trip. Here we're also shown that Tyler's sister is pregnant. A little bit of foreshadowing, if you will. So they delve deeper into the ship named the Renaissance, which is divided into 2 separate sections, Romulus and Remus, which is really cool. I like stuff like this in my spooky alien films. But they find a cryo storage area, which is used for not only the fuel canisters, but also to house this film's main antagonist for the most of the film, which is the facehuggers. They go through into the lab where they find the broken down android, where we really get more tension between Jorn and Andy. There is a moment where he makes an aggressive comment towards Andy, where Andy grabs him, where it's just revealed that Andy's trying to prevent the guy from falling down a really deep hole, which is caused by the acidic blood of a xenomorph. Or at least anyone knows that it's the acidic blood of a xenomorph. If you've watched the films, you know it. We also find a ripped in half android, which seems to be off for the most part. They enter inside the cryo storage, take out the cryo fuel, causes the place to emergency shutdown, where Andy doesn't have the clearance, so they go into this new android that was ripped in half to try and get into its clearance chip, which actually ends up bringing the android to life until they shut it down. All while the temperature is rising due to them removing the cryo fuel, which keeps the facehuggers frozen. He gives the new hard drive to Tyler, who installs it into Andy, which actually temporarily shuts him down, which leads to one of the best horror segments of it, where the multiple facehuggers are falling into the water, and it's just really tension. There's a lot of tension in the scene. It's just yummers. The facehuggers are so much more of a threat in this film than they are in the other ones, in my opinion. They're a lot more focused on, and it definitely shows later on in the film, where there's other scenes like the facehugger room, which is like temperature degrees. Later escape, now having the clearance level, and not before, however, Navarro is face-hugged and impregnated by the facehugger. They boot up the android, who we see to be Sir Ian Holm, the late Sir Ian Holm, who has his likeness CGI'd over, who is also played by Daniel Betts, who I think did a really good job of recreating the really scary AI from the first one. I think he did a really good job with that, where this robot essentially says that Navarro is essentially done for. Navarro more than likely has the embryo inside of them, which they actually break off in a really creative way, but by then it's too late. Inserting this new chip into Andy, however, it seems to upgrade his just senses in general. He's a lot more well-spoken, he's not as twitchy or autistic, he is acting very strange, and it's later because we found out that his prime directive and everything has been rebooted to fit more with the company because he now has a Weyland-Yutani chip inside of him. I actually find it to be very reminiscent of the Alien Covenant conversation between the two AIs compared to this one, where you get to feel two of them and how different they are, except in this one, they're similar because he's literally just inserted hardware from Weyland-Yutani robots on the ship into this android. I want to also say that I really like Andy in this film. I think that it's probably one of the better parts of the film as well. All the stuff between him and Rain, you really get a feel for the character. You feel like there is a lot of history between these two, and you really start to feel for Rain with how like disgusted that she gets in Andy as the film progresses, as Andy acts more and more like just a general Weyland-Yutani robot. For most of the film though, however, Andy has made with one prime directive, which is do the best for Rain, and it gets to a point where for her own safety, Andy actually attempts to attack Navarro and kill Navarro before Navarro can birth this chestburster baby. It obviously leads to a bunch of drama within the group, leading Bourne to attack Andy so that they can run away, which essentially just means that Andy and Navarro are dead because of chestburster. And that chestburster scene, by the way, that's all I'm going to say about that. One thing that also should be noted throughout this film is that this film did not shy away from practical effects. Alvarez even stated that he wanted to really lean into the more practical effect history of the Alien series, and it definitely shows in here as well, where everything is either a puppet from a rover facehugger to like the full body suit for the xenomorph to the later on reveal within the climax. Everything just feels alive because you can physically see it. I feel like practical effects will always be better than CGI because you can actually physically tell that what you're looking at is real, and I feel like it really helps with the mood, and it really helps set in the tone of the film as well. You just feel like what you're looking at is there, as opposed to a computer generated like version of that exact same thing. It's just the real thing stands out a lot more. Film also happens to have my favorite like organic life cycle of the xenomorph. We happen to see on screen where we actually see it shed the chestburster skin and then turning into essentially a giant like cancer on a wall, where we see its defense systems and we see it essentially burst out of the cocoon like a moth would out of its little capsule. The xenomorph in this film just feels like a predator, like a very intelligent predator, where when it first shows up and you first get to see it and it's preying on Tyler's sister, it actually doesn't attack right away because it waits for Andy to open the door so it can kill everyone, except Andy doesn't do this because Andy's protecting Rain in her best interest, which disgusts her because he ends up letting Tyler's sister die. Afterwards, we are then taken on a little fetch quest by Andy, where his whole thing now is the prime directive of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation to retrieve a substance from the actual labs down below. We actually end up finding a connection that I really did not expect to see in this film, which is this film really does feel like a sequel to Prometheus as well, where the actual fluid from Prometheus is talked about more and they reverse engineer it back into that like weapon of war weapon that it was in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, which I've always found like super interesting. I've always found Prometheus to be really interesting of a film, explaining the engineers and about how they created humans, but then they didn't like how humans turned out, so they went to destroy them with said weapon of war. We're also explained by Rook that humans are not fit for space travel, so what they decided to do was take this perfect organism, the xenomorph, and take the stuff out of it and bio-revert it back into this Prometheus goo, of which could be converted into injections that they could put to make the perfect human. And Andy's entire purpose was to recollect this. We're also shown the two smart pulse rifles, which also has aimbot, which is pretty cool in my opinion. They also spot the same noises from the original films, films, which is just a nice little touchback for me personally, which is also used in one of the cooler scenes of the film, the shootout at the Hive, all in beautiful anti-gravity. He takes them through an area of the elevator, which leads straight down to a long corridor where we hear Tyler's sister yelling, and we actually find out she was taken down to a hive, which obviously indicates that there are a lot more xenomorphs on this ship than people thought. It really helps solidify the idea in this film that xenomorphs are parasites, much like wasps, which I've always really enjoyed about these series. I really feel like, even though it was established in Aliens, I think that this film really did it the best, even though you never see a queen in this film. A lot of this film just feels like different scenes from the other films which are recreated and used for something brand new. It just feels like a total love letter to the series. We find Tyler's sister attached to the hive, who has not been impregnated by a facehugger. The reason being, Andy believes, is because she is rapidly bleeding out from the alien attack beforehand. With the remaining survivors being desperate to try and find a way to stop her from bleeding out, Andy offers a solution in the form of an injection that was found in the lab, containing that Prometheus goo that was said to make the ultimate person. What the characters don't know, however, what we were shown was that in that lab, it worked on the rat in the image, but we actually find out that the rat grows to mutate into a xenomorph type creature, which looks really cool, might I add. One could also say that this foreshadows a later moment in the film. Rain takes Tyler's sister, puts her on the elevator with the serums, saying she needs to get back to the ship, put the ship on autopilot, and that Rain would find a way out herself. As she's saying this, however, a xenomorph creeps up on her and goes to swing in for the kill. However, Tyler jumps in the way and is actually killed in this moment. I would say is kind of shocking for me, because I really thought he was going to last the whole film. Then again, it wouldn't be an Alien film without a sole survivor. She jumps back down from the elevator to bring back Andy, removing the actual Weyland-Yutani chip, and however, Rook locks them in the ship, which is made easier by the fact that Andy no longer has his clearance level. And then they just sit there, thinking that it's the end. And it's honestly quite a really nice scene. However, they tell a joke, and it's what leads them to get to one of the most action-packed moments of the whole film, where they turn on the anti-gravity and just start shooting xenomorphs with the smart cannon, and we are greeted with old sound effects from the old Alien films, and it's absolutely great, and I just could not have been happier hearing it, which allows them to escape. However, on the elevator, Tyler decides to inject the Prometheus goo into her system, and as you remember, she is pregnant, which probably wouldn't mean the best thing for everyone. And we are given a scene straight out of Prometheus where she actually gives birth to a alien. And I'm not talking chestburster, I'm talking like just full birth on screen. Nothing is like shown, but it's very bloody, it's disgusting, and it's fantastic. It's as Ridley Scott as a Ridley Scott film could get. Like, I'm obviously throwing away the professionalism that I don't have, but the alien that comes out of her and is shown later on is just fucking amazing. It is insane how awesome it is. It's like a mix between the engineers from Prometheus, the neomorphs from Covenant, a little bit of the newborn from Resurrections, and just delicious in every possible way. This design is just fucking cool. And it actually got one of like the few moments in years with horror for me that's actually got me to be like on edge. And the scene where you actually see it leaning out of a door, it's completely silent, and it works wonders. It works like something that you see out of an analog horror series. This creature is also practical effects, by the way, I might add. It wreaks havoc, kills the sister, damages Andy, and is the final confrontation for this Alien film, because it wouldn't be an Alien film without a final standoff, ending with it being blasted into the belt and vaporized, like a scene straight out of Resurrections. And that's essentially Alien Romulus. It is a really, really, really good love letter to the Alien series. It takes little bits from every single one of them and connects it together, as well as Alien, Covenant, and Prometheus is also taken into account. There was a part where you actually hear them talk about the Prometheus goo, and then you hear the Prometheus theme, and it got a big smile out of me. I soy-jacked in the cinema many times watching this. It also does a thing that a lot of Alien films tend to struggle with, which is make you care about everyone in the cast, with the exception of one little British. There's a few moments in this that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you can overlook it in the grand scheme of things. It never really sticks out to you, but I recommend this. I give it 9 out of 10. Watch it if you haven't. It's my film of the year, and it's filled with beautiful practical effects. Everything just feels alive. The sound effects are fantastic. The score is fantastic. The acting is great. Just everything about it is just wonderful to me. Gorgeous visuals and cinematography and all that stuff. It's just beautiful film, honestly. It's spooky, it's atmospheric, it's gorgeous, it's claustrophobic, it's everything you want. And I'm looking forward to see what else they do with this series, because it will be getting more films because of how successful this film is. Everyone is loving this film. This is going to be a very lucrative film thing if they keep this streak going. So I am welcoming and ready for all new Alien films if we get more. But that's essentially it. Please watch it, and I'll see you next time.
Alien Romulus and the love story between a Roman emigrant alien and an inclusive and independent young woman. However, their love story has changed. He no longer respects her and denigrates her, treats her like a clown, and always out conquering worlds and complaining that I'm useless and weak.